This morning in the town of Al-Khatifa, north of Damascus, we witness firsthand the beginnings of what Syria's new army will look like. Takbir! Allahu Akbar! Takbir! Allahu Akbar! These are the Damascus Eagles, during the uprising over 10 years ago, part of the Free Syrian Army in this area. They've just taken these weapons from the captured headquarters of the old regime's military intelligence branch in the town.
بشار الكلب حاطه بوسط المدنيه مشان شو؟ مشان يقتلنا فيه. فنحن راح نطب السلاح وراح نبني ان شاء الله دولتنا الجديده المدنيه اللي متعامله مع كل الدول العربيه ان شاء الله والاسلاميه والغربيه.
When the regime fell, local people stormed the base and took the weapons out. There were some still inside. Now local forces have come. They're collecting all the weapons and they're handing them over to HDS. What you're seeing here in front of you is this change of administration in front of our eyes, in timber boxes, in the backs of trucks.
These rebels now control a strategically vital part of Syria between Homs and Damascus. It's full of regime military bases, arms depots. The commander spoke to us.
نحن اليوم عم نسابق الزمن بصراحة. المشاكل اللي بتصير نحن نبني سوريا المستقبل والشعب كله متعاون معنا وبيئتنا هاي حاضنتنا الشعبية كلياتها اللي كانت ضد بشار الأسد ما كان حدا مؤيد له إلا بالغصب. حاليا العالم كله مباشرة عم بترجع لنا المدنية عم بيرجعوا لنا السلاح مباشرة. هاي النقطة اللي شفتوها هون.
HDS are not HDS anymore though. They're the lead partner in a coalition of rebels including these men. Disparate groups plus a lot of weaponry, a recipe for who knows what. When all the guns were gone, we went inside the facility. In the basement, a young fighter stayed behind. This was where the interrogation rooms were. Mohammed knows that because this is where he was tortured just 6 months ago.
كل شيء أسري ببلش فيك فيها بنزلك بالمي بطالعك بحطك بالبرد مثلا بوقفك بالشمس بيشبحك مثلا بحط قدامك كلاب هيك وضرب العصايات يعني كثير أنا لما قعدت وقفوني رفعوني هيك شيء 5 سنتي على الأرض وضرب ضرب ضرب ضرب.
In other words, for this young fighter, this is personal. His cause is not complicated. He doesn't want to be tortured anymore.
Can you show us your face or would you prefer not to?
No.
He knew the man that tortured him, but now the tortured are in charge.
Do you have anything that you would like to say to him?
ما أعرف شو أقول لك يعني قولوا الله بس.
Yesterday we reported on the mass grave at Al-Khatifa. It's just down the road from here. Mohammed could have easily ended up there. Or at this mass grave outside Damascus. This morning we witnessed some of the first official exhumations of bodies there. The remains of 7 people were exhumed. At this stage the white helmets are only taking out skeletons and corpses from graves that are open or exposed. Samples were taken of bones for DNA testing and identification. Records of the names and prison numbers kept that they were buried with.
What do those numbers tell us about the prisons that they were at?
We don't know, honestly, and this is the point about like the absence of the regime, the absence of database. There is no system has information about the prisoners or document about the people, any records about that. So we don't know where they came from. We don't know what they were suffering from. One of them, it come with this medical or hospital clothes. So we believe it's moved to a hospital, then bring to here.
And so the meticulous business of unraveling tyranny begins. Mass graves start being treated as individual cases. Bodies that arrived here in their dozens leave in small groups. The delicate process of treading softly because you tread on dreams.
Paraic O'Brien reporting. Now, the Syrian filmmaker and activist Waad al-Khatib, who made award-winning reports for this program from besieged Aleppo and was nominated for an Oscar for her documentary Warsame, has been giving evidence to the UN Security Council in New York. She said the Assad regime had turned Syria into a theater of unimaginable crimes.
The fall of Assad regime did not happen in 11 days or through one recent battle. It happened because of the countless sacrifices, struggles, and the losses of the Syrian people. It happens because 13 million Syrians were forced from their homes, hundreds of thousands drowned at sea. Countless others died in bombed schools and hospitals, and hundreds of thousands were detained, tortured, and forcibly disappeared. It happened when the Syrian people lost everything except their voices, their courage, and their hope.
The UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator Tom Fletcher also addressed the Security Council earlier from Damascus, where he met Syria's new leadership. I spoke to him a little while ago, and I began by asking him what he had made of Ahmed al-Sharaa, formerly known as al-Jalani, the leader of the HTS rebel group.
I had a good session with him. He's quiet, softly spoken. He was very thoughtful. He listened very carefully. We talked a lot about the challenges of governing. I used to work in number 10 under 3 prime ministers, so I've seen how difficult that is, even in normal times and even without an inheritance like the one that he has. So I was encouraged. And by the end of the meeting, he'd agreed to give us what we were hoping for. We've got a better, more permissive environment now for our aid operations than we ever had under Bashar al Assad.
Right. So from your dealings with him, he doesn't sound like a terrorist, and yet he's still on the terrorist list amongst a number of countries, including the United Kingdom and the United States. Do you think he should be off that list?
Well, that's a matter for those countries. The great joy of my job is that I can go anywhere, talk to anyone to get the job done. I'm here to get the aid through, and that's the mission. And that means talking to whoever is on the ground and can help us to do that.
Right. But there are so many factions inside Syria. They all seem to be working together at the moment. There are so many outside powers who have an interest in Syria, not least Israel and, of course, Turkey. From your experience of these kind of situations, is there any way that this does not all end in tears?
Well, I'm an optimist, and I'm also a former diplomat. And George Mitchell said of diplomacy, it's 799 days of failure and 1 day of success. So I believe that in the end, we do get there. Now, there's a definite moment of hope here. I was walking through the old city of Damascus last night and meeting Syrians, and they are scared. They are daunted. They are worried about whether the government will truly be as inclusive as they hope it will be. There are concerns about whether it really will ensure that the rights of women and girls are protected, as I've been insisting that they must be. But they're also feeling this sense of cautious hope and liberation after decades of this oppressive Assad regime. So I think there's something there to work with. And I think that having failed Syria for so long, that we as the international community should get behind the Syrian people now. And that means, by the way, that all those various hands, those various countries that are meddling in Syria, that are trying to take advantage of the situation, should now back off and create the space for Syrians themselves to chart their own independent course.
And do you think that a functioning, transparent, accountable, maybe even democratic society can be born from the ruins and the atrocities and the brutality of the last 50 years?
Well, in the end, all democracies have come from some pretty bad situations. And, I know from talking to people that that's what they want, that they feel an optimism that they can do it. Now, it is not going to be easy. And I'm not going to sit here and be starry-eyed that we'll be having some sort of Swedish-style democracy in the next couple of weeks. It will take real time and real effort. But it's what the Syrian people deserve, and we should be giving them all the support they need, including my work, delivering that humanitarian support to get the country through this period and get it rebuilt.
Finally, and very briefly, if you don't mind, we're hearing tonight that there might be some sort of ceasefire deal, hostages for a cessation of fighting in Gaza. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm just picking up those reports as well, and as ever, encouraging, if true, that there's that wider prospect for a normalization and a ceasefire deal. We'll be ready if it happens. Delivering aid at the moment is incredibly difficult, and anything that helps us save lives in such a grim situation will be hugely welcome.
Tom Fletcher, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Syria's third city, Homs, was called the capital of the revolution against the regime of Bashar al Assad. Its people paid a very high price for rebelling against the dictatorship. One diplomat said that what happened there broke the limits of barbarity. Homs lies north of Damascus. In February 2012, the Sunday Times journalist Marie Colvin was killed there by the Assad regime in the neighborhood of Baba Amar, which was at the time under siege. Our international editor, Lindsay Hilsum, has been back there.
The people of Baba Amar have grown used to living amongst rubble. 13 years ago, they rose against the regime of Bashar al Assad, and the punishment they endured as a result was extreme. 6 months of siege, random bombardment of civilian neighborhoods, so much destruction, and after the regime prevailed, unfettered cruelty. The construction workers rest in the rubble too, before getting back to the task of raising Baba Amar from its ruins.
Those who can are already starting to rebuild. This part of Baba Amar saw the worst of the fighting during the siege of 2012. But many of the people I've been meeting, all they really want to talk about is their families. A son who was killed, a daughter who disappeared, the torture they endured in prison. They can't really think about the future yet. It's very important. And do you think that you will get justice for your brother?
In the street, women crowd around to tell their stories, some in tears of grief or rage.
ابني كان شاب معه سيارة هذا الكبير يا حرام أخذوه اعتقلوه وقت اعتقلوه شبقوا لي هلا بالأرض قاعد بلبنان نحن ببيوتنا قاعدين يقتلونا يا أمي والله العظيم ما نعرف شيء ما شفنا الطيران ها والله يا بنتي ما لنا عاملين شيء والله العظيم.
Baba Amar is an impoverished Sunni neighborhood, always an opposition stronghold. That's why the regime persecuted people here. Families paid a high price as their sons and daughters joined the revolution, some as unarmed activists, others as fighters. Mariam Suleiman can only imagine what happened to her husband.
جوزي اجوا اخذوه من الباب، جوزي بيشتغل بالكهرباء، كهربجي، اخذوه السياسية على اساس يصلي عندهم كهرباء، اخذته انه كاتبين في تقرير واخذوه هي اخذته.
One son was killed, another injured on the front line. She blames Bashar al Assad and his men.
And does she want them in prison or does she want them dead?
لا قص. مثل اولادنا، مثل ما دمرونا نحن وعذبونا ونحن بيتعذبوا نفس تعذيبنا.
من 2012
Manhal and Bashar haven't seen each other since the end of the siege. They're outside the rebuilt rebel media center where journalists stayed in February 2012. Amongst them, Marie Colvin of the Sunday Times and photographer Paul Conroy. The regime shelled the center on the 22nd. Marie and a French photographer, Remy Oshlik, were killed right here, while Paul was injured.
الحي ضل ينقصف 25 يوم أو 27 يوم تقريبا. ماري دخلت تقريبا بآخر أسبوع من القصف، يعني أو أكثر أو 10 أيام. دخلت لعنا لهون واستقبلناها بالمكتب الإعلامي اللي فوق موجود هون. كان معها المصور بول كونري. استقبلناهم بالفترة هذيك آخر 10 أيام، يعني يمكن حتى أكل ما ضل عنا نهائيا، يعني كل شيء مخزون عنا نفد. كهرباء يعني صار احنا كنا نستعمل المولد وهيك، حتى بنزين ما ضل عنا، يعني ما ضل عنا شيء نقدم لهم اياه.
Bashar, who's a paramedic, took us to the house which the rebels turned into a field hospital. So many painful memories. They managed to save the lives of Paul and a French reporter, Edith Bouvier. But there were hundreds they couldn't save because their injuries were even more severe.
مختلف انواع الاصابات القصف، يعني بيشمل كل شيء، اصابات الراس، اصابات الجسم بالكامل، يعني كل اصابات بطنيه، اصابات صدريه، يعني كل انواع الاصابات.
ولكن ما عندنا الكادر الطبي كان اللي يقدر، يعني الإصابات العصبية هي بحكم الموت، إصابات قطع الشريان هي بحكم الموت. ما كان في أطباء مختصين يتابعوا هاي الحالات.
The people of Baba Amar helped foreign journalists because they believed that if the world knew about their suffering, governments would do something. They were wrong. And then they were punished further.
What happened to you? قتلت وعلى الكهرب حطوني كهرب هيك وانا مرة كبيرة حطوني اعدام طلعت طعمة صحفية وعند بيتي خليه طلعت طعميهم ببيتي قالوا حطيتيهم ببيتك نومتيهم وخذوني اعدام كانوا اعدام وابني وبنتي كنا عيلتنا كلنا وزلمتي كلها عيلتنا كلها خذوها كثير شو بدي احكي لك وبنتي هيك معلينا هيك طالبة الجامعة معلينا هيك ووجهها تروح وتجي هيك وضرب فيها بالكهرب صرت على الكهرب وجوزي كلها عيلتنا كلها.
Now the dictator is gone, but at what cost?
يعني هو بالنسبة للشعب السوري كيف بدي أقول لك يعني ما راح ينسى أي حدا ضحى معه، يعني مستحيل يعني هذا الشيء، ولو كان بكلمة ولو كان بأي شيء، وهذا الشيء يعني الشعب السوري ما راح ينسى الصحفية أو مثل مئات اللي قتلهم نظام بشار الأسد.
Baba Amar has a special place in the history of the Syrian revolution. A civil court in the USA found the Assad regime liable for the murder of Marie Colvin. The people of Baba Amar are yet to see any justice.